When I was 9 months pregnant, my water broke suddenly. At the time, my husband and mother-in-law were busy planning a family trip. Instead of helping me, they erupted in anger. "You've ruined our trip! Couldn't you have picked a better time for this?" my husband shouted. Then, without a second thought, they dragged me out of the house and locked the door behind me. What happened next was shocking beyond anything I could have imagined. "Hello, my name is Clara, and I'm 9 months pregnant. It's my first time having a baby, and while I'm full of nerves, I also feel incredibly blessed to be welcoming a new life into our family. My husband Luke works an office job and has weekends off, but he doesn't help much at home or with shopping. Instead, he spends almost every weekend at his parents' house. They live nearby, and even though there's no real reason for him to visit so often, he's deeply attached to them. Since I became pregnant, I've been careful about lifting heavy things. For example, when I need to buy heavy items like a bag of rice, kind friends often help me out. My daily routine is quite simple. I wake up early, make breakfast for Luke, and see him off to work. After that, I do the cleaning, laundry, and shopping. When I get back home, I start preparing dinner. Only after finishing everything can I finally relax. While on maternity leave, I started blogging as a new hobby. Every day, I write a diary and post photos of little things that make me happy, meals I cook, the blue sky, flowers in the garden, and more. Friends and acquaintances leave kind comments, and journaling has become a small but meaningful joy in my life. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Luke came home. As usual, he tossed his bag and jacket carelessly onto the sofa. I sighed, picked them up, and hung them on the coat rack. "Welcome back," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I made hamburgers for dinner." "I'm taking a bath," he replied curtly and walked straight to the bathroom without a second glance. It's been 3 years since we got married, and Luke's kindness and consideration have all but disappeared. Sometimes I wonder if this is what marriage is supposed to be like. But honestly, I've given up trying to change things. When Luke returned from his bath, wearing his pajamas, I handed him a drink. "Where's the beer?" he asked, glancing at the bar. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I forgot to buy it today. I'll get some tomorrow." Luke's mood shifted instantly. His expression darkened, and he snapped, "Seriously? Go to the convenience store now." I froze for a moment, his sudden anger catching me off guard. This was just another reminder of how little respect or care he had for me. I felt irritated. Why was he asking his pregnant wife to go out and buy beer? If you want it so badly, why don't you go get it yourself? I said, "It's hard for me to move around with this big belly." Hearing that, he became even angrier and started shouting, "You're the one who forgot to buy it. It's your job to fix that mistake. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you deserve special treatment. My mom always said it's important to stay active for your health." Knowing he wouldn't calm down easily when he was angry, I reluctantly decided to go to the convenience store. When I arrived, I bumped into Sophie, my neighbor. "Oh, Sophie, good evening," I said, trying to sound cheerful despite the weight in my chest. "Good evening, Clara," Sophie replied, her warm smile easing some of my tension. "Did you forget to buy something too?" "I just ran out of sauce, so I came here. My husband really wanted beer, so I came to get it," I replied, forcing a light chuckle. Sophie frowned slightly. "Why didn't he just go himself?" "That's exactly what I said," I muttered, sighing. But he wouldn't listen. Sophie looked concerned. "Clara, you're due any day now. You shouldn't be running around like this. It sounds like you're having a tough time." We walked together for a bit before parting ways at the crossroads. Her sympathy warmed me, but it also reminded me of how isolated I felt in my own marriage. When I got home, I found Luke lounging on the sofa watching TV. He hadn't even cleaned up after dinner. "What took you so long? What were you doing?" "Give me the beer," he said in an annoyed tone. His rude words and insensitive attitude made my heart ache. Without saying a word, I handed him the beer and started cleaning up after dinner. How could he say such things to me, especially while I was pregnant? I thought to myself. I wanted to say something back, but I didn't want to start another fight, so I kept quiet. After cleaning up, I ate my dinner alone, took a relaxing bath, and headed to bed. The next morning, Luke acted like nothing had happened. He seemed like the type to forget everything after a good night's sleep. But I couldn't forget his words from the night before and chose to ignore him. The morning passed uneventfully. Luke left for work after a quick breakfast, barely glancing in my direction. His dismissive attitude gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside, focusing instead on preparing for the day. Later that evening, Luke came home with an unusually upbeat demeanor. "Hey, Clara, I've been talking with my parents. We're planning a family trip next weekend." I froze. Next weekend. I repeated hesitantly, but that's right around my due date. I don't think traveling is a good idea. Luke waved off my concern. Pregnancy isn't an illness, Clara. My mom says she traveled up until the day she delivered me. It'll be fine. Luke, this isn't about what your mom did years ago, I said cautiously, trying not to provoke him. It's about what's safe for me and the baby. I don't think I can. Don't start with your excuses, he interrupted, his tone sharp. Everything's already planned. You just need to pack your bags and be ready. I felt my heart sink. He wasn't even pretending to listen to me. Luke, I'm serious. I don't feel comfortable going on a trip so close to my due date. Why do you always have to ruin everything? He snapped. This is supposed to be a nice family trip, and here you are making it all about you. Just get ready for the trip, Clara. End of discussion. With that, he stormed out of the room, leaving me sitting there, stunned. The baby was due any day, and instead of supporting me, Luke was prioritizing a vacation with his parents. The ache in my chest grew, but I reminded myself to stay calm for the baby's sake. The days passed, and despite my growing discomfort, Luke remained fixated on the upcoming family trip. He spent hours discussing logistics with his parents, ignoring my concerns entirely. I tried to focus on preparing for the baby's arrival, but my unease only grew as the weekend approached. On the evening before the trip, Luke was sitting at the dining table with his laptop open, finalizing details. I was in the kitchen, putting away the dishes when a sharp pain shot through my abdomen. A moment later, I felt a warm gush. My heart raced as I realized what had just happened. My water had broken. "Luke!" I called out, my voice trembling. "Luke, my water just broke. The baby's coming. We need to get to the hospital." Luke looked up from his laptop, his expression annoyed rather than concerned. "Are you serious right now, Clara? You always pick the worst times for this kind of drama. We're supposed to leave tomorrow morning." "This isn't about timing, Luke. The baby is coming," I pleaded, clutching my belly. He slammed his laptop shut and stood up, glaring at me. "You're unbelievable. Do you have any idea how much effort has gone into planning this trip? And now you're going to ruin everything." I stared at him in disbelief. "Luke, this is our baby. How can you talk like that? Please, we need to go to the hospital." But instead of helping me, he grabbed my arm and began dragging me toward the front door. "If you're so desperate to go, then go, but don't expect me to waste my time or money on this. You're ruining everything." "Luke, stop!" I cried, struggling to free myself. "You can't leave me like this." He ignored my protests, opened the front door, and shoved me outside. "You're on your own, Clara. Don't bother calling me until this is over." He slammed the door shut and locked it behind me. Standing on the doorstep in disbelief, I could feel the cool night air against my skin, contrasting sharply with the warmth of the tears streaming down my face. The pain in my abdomen grew sharper, and panic started to set in. I knocked on the door weakly, hoping that Luke might realize the gravity of the situation and open it. "Luke, please don't do this." I cried out, but there was no response. I could hear him moving inside, his voice faint as he resumed his conversation with his parents about the trip. My pleas were met with cold indifference. At that moment, I heard a familiar voice from across the street. "Clara, is everything okay?" It was Sophie, my neighbor. Her concern was evident as she rushed toward me. "Sophie," I gasped, struggling to keep my balance. "My water broke and Luke, he locked me out. I don't know what to do." Her eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God, Clara. Come on. Let's get you to the hospital. Don't worry, I've got you." Sophie quickly called a cab and helped me into the back seat. She stayed by my side the entire ride, holding my hand and reassuring me. "You're going to be fine, Clara. Just focus on your breathing. I'll make sure you're safe at the hospital." The nurses took over, guiding me to a room and preparing for the delivery. Sophie stayed with me, refusing to leave until she was certain I was in good hands. As I was wheeled into the delivery room, I clutched her hand tightly. "Thank you, Sophie," I whispered through my tears. "I don't know what I would have done without you." "Just focus on bringing that little one into the world," she said with a warm smile. "I'll be right here when you need me." The hours in the delivery room felt endless, but as the baby's first cries filled the air, all my pain and exhaustion seemed to fade. A nurse gently placed my newborn into my arms, and I felt an overwhelming wave of love and relief. "You're beautiful," I whispered, tears streaming down my face as I cradled the tiny bundle against my chest. For a moment, the betrayal and hurt I had endured didn't matter. My child was here, safe and healthy, and that was all that mattered. When I was wheeled into the hospital room after delivery, I saw my parents waiting anxiously. My mom rushed to my side, tears in her eyes. "Clara, sweetheart, we're so proud of you," she said softly, stroking my hair. My dad, usually stoic, had a tear rolling down his cheek as he said, "We'll do whatever it takes to make sure you and the baby are safe and happy." Their support gave me a renewed sense of strength. Sophie, who had stayed with me through the entire ordeal, walked in with a warm smile and a bouquet of flowers. "You did it, Clara," she said, sitting beside me. "You're stronger than you know." I held my baby close, looking at the faces of the people who truly cared about me. For the first time in months, I felt hope. While I rested in the hospital, recovering and bonding with my baby, the outside world was erupting with outrage over what Luke had done. Sophie had shared my story with a close friend who is active on social media. This friend, careful to protect my privacy, wrote a detailed post about the incident, describing how my husband abandoned me during labor. The post quickly went viral, sparking an outpouring of support for me and harsh criticism of Luke. Within hours, people began piecing together Luke's identity. By the next morning, his employer had caught wind of the scandal. A representative from his company called him in for a meeting, where he was informed that his behavior was unacceptable and did not align with their values. Without hesitation, they terminated his employment. Luke's reputation was in ruins. Friends, colleagues, and even extended family began distancing themselves from him. His parents, who had always defended and enabled his actions, weren't spared either. Their neighbor, who had once admired their seemingly perfect family, now treated them with disdain. Meanwhile, Luke bombarded my phone with calls and messages. At first, they were defensive. "You're making this worse by letting people talk about us," one message read. Then they shifted to desperate. "Please, Clara, I can fix this. Just come back, and we can start over." I ignored every call, every text. My focus was on my baby and my recovery, not on a man who had proven himself incapable of love or responsibility. As I regained my strength, I knew I couldn't let Luke walk away from his actions unscathed. With my parents' encouragement, I reached out to a lawyer to explore my options. When I met with a lawyer, I laid everything out: the emotional abuse, the abandonment, and the viral video that had exposed Luke's cruelty. The lawyer listened attentively, nodding as I spoke. "This is a strong case," he said. The video alone is compelling evidence. With your testimony and the public outrage, we can ensure you get the justice and protection you deserve. Luke, on the other hand, tried to deflect responsibility. When the lawyer contacted him, he said defensively, "This is a private matter. Clara is overreacting. She doesn't need a lawyer." But when the lawyer mentioned the possibility of court proceedings, Luke panicked. The idea of further public humiliation clearly terrified him. At first, he refused to agree to any terms. He demanded to see the baby and claimed he had done nothing wrong. However, as pressure mounted, he reluctantly agreed to the divorce. The settlement terms were clear and firm. I would have full custody of my child, and Luke was required to pay child support. He attempted to evade the financial obligations, but my lawyer ensured the terms were legally binding. Luke's parents tried to intervene, arguing that I was being unfair to their son, but the viral backlash against them had left them powerless. They couldn't risk further damage to their tarnished reputation. When the divorce was finalized, I felt an immense sense of relief. For the first time in years, I was free from Luke's control. My baby and I could finally start a new chapter. With the divorce finalized, I moved back into my parents' home. They welcomed me and my baby with open arms, transforming one of the spare rooms into a cozy nursery. The love and support they gave me were a balm to the wounds left by Luke's betrayal. Sophie continued to be a constant presence in my life, visiting often and bringing little gifts for the baby. "You're doing amazing, Clara," she would say during our chats, her encouragement lifting my spirits. She even started organizing playdates with her own children, giving me glimpses of the peaceful life I had longed for. Meanwhile, Luke's life continued to spiral downward. The viral video had destroyed his reputation, and his tarnished name made it nearly impossible for him to find a stable job. He had to move back in with his parents, who were also struggling under the weight of public judgment. Their neighbors whispered behind their backs, and invitations to social events dried up completely. Despite Luke's repeated attempts to contact me, ranging from desperate apologies to veiled accusations, I refused to engage. My lawyer handled all communication, ensuring that the terms of our divorce and custody agreement were strictly enforced. One day, as I rocked my baby to sleep, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I had endured so much pain and heartache, but it had led me to this moment, safe, loved, and surrounded by people who truly cared about me. Months passed, and life slowly settled into a comforting routine. My parents and I grew closer, rebuilding bonds that had frayed during my time with Luke. They doted on their grandchild, their laughter filling the house as they played with the baby. Sophie and I became closer than ever, our friendship deepened by the events we had weathered together. Her husband, who had initially stayed in the background, expressed his admiration for Sophie's kindness and courage. "You're lucky to have her," he told me one afternoon. I nodded, knowing just how true that was. As I looked ahead, I realized that my story wasn't just about pain and betrayal. It was about resilience and the strength to build a better future. I had learned to value myself and the people who uplifted me. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly hopeful. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Clara's story is a powerful reminder of resilience and finding strength even in the darkest moments. If this story moved you or gave you something to think about, please give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring and thought-provoking stories like this one. Hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next story.